For centuries, the survival of European empires depended on fragile, long-distance supply lines across the open ocean. They looked for wealth in far-off territories, often overlooking the massive potential of the North American interior. Unlike the European powers, the early United States possessed the Mississippi River system. This network was wide, deep, and slow-moving, making it the most efficient industrial highway on Earth. It allowed for the internal movement of resources with almost zero friction, fueling a rapid surge in domestic growth. This topographical map shows the scale of this physical layout. The U.S. contains 17,600 miles of interconnected, navigable waterways laid directly over massive arable farmland. While fragmented European geography fostered competing nations, the U.S. was shielded from invasion by two vast oceans. This synergy between internal transport, food production, and strategic depth enabled the U.S. to build a level of capital density that eclipsed its global rivals. This era of internal growth faced a sudden shock in 1890. The U.S. Census Bureau issued a report declaring that a continuous American frontier line no longer existed. Historian Frederick Jackson Turner used this data to propose his frontier thesis. He argued that American identity and economic momentum were tied directly to constant westward expansion. With the continent settled from coast to coast, the U.S. economy hit a wall. Domestic capital began to stagnate, creating an internal bottleneck that threatened to trigger a national depression. Running out of land forced a choice: accept economic decline or find a way to project American influence beyond the continent. The 1898 Spanish-American War served as the release valve for this trapped domestic energy. The U.S. used the conflict to forcefully seize overseas territories, establishing colonial footprints in Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This expansion turned the United States into an interventionist power, moving its focus from settling internal land to controlling global trade routes and resources. By 1945, the infrastructure of the Old World was decimated. Because the American mainland remained untouched by the war, Washington held a total monopoly on global industrial power. The U.S. leveraged this position to trade military protection for strategic control. This established NATO in Europe and a series of bilateral alliances in the Pacific, known as the San Francisco System. This military strategy had a financial counterpart. In 1944, delegates met at Bretton Woods to build a new international monetary order. This flowchart shows the mechanism of the new system. The U.S. dollar became the sole anchor of global trade, backed by gold at $35 an ounce, while all other allied currencies were pegged to the dollar. This architecture allowed the U.S. to lead an empire by invitation, where global power and capital flowed voluntarily toward Washington in exchange for stability. By the late 1960s, the system reached a mathematical limit. The U.S. was spending so much on military and social programs that foreign nations held more dollars than the U.S. held in actual gold. Facing a total run on its gold reserves, President Richard Nixon unilaterally suspended the dollar's convertibility to gold in 1971. The impact was immediate. The devalued dollar and rising energy costs triggered rampant inflation and severe fuel shortages, destabilizing the American domestic market. The collapse of the gold standard threatened the global demand for the dollar. To keep its position, the U.S. had to find a new way to anchor its currency to a vital global resource. In 1974, the U.S. reached a deal with Saudi Arabia. In exchange for military protection, the Saudis agreed to price all their oil exports exclusively in U.S. dollars. This created the petrodollar system. Because every nation needs energy, central banks worldwide were forced to hold massive dollar reserves to pay for oil, which the U.S. then recycled into treasury bonds. Today, the shale evolution has enabled the U.S. to become a leading energy producer, achieving a level of self-sufficiency that is altering its need to maintain these complex global systems. American power is the result of geographic fortune meeting a series of crisis-driven tactical mutations. By adapting its strategy for over a century, the nation has maintained a highly resilient global financial system.